All right. Well, hi, everybody. I am Ann Nowakowski, and for the past several years, I've been working from home as a full-time employee. So I have been in your shoes, wondering how to stay sane with this new way of working. Today, I hope to share a handful of just the most impactful tips and tricks that have really made a difference for me and still work for me 6 years later. So this isn't a one-on-one or 101, more of a 201. So there's things that I'm sure that you all know about how to Zoom that I'm not going to cover because you already know it. Things like make sure your technology works and download the update more than 5 minutes before the presentation, um, be wearing clothes, those kinds of things. So this really isn't going to be those like kind of self-explanatory things, but just the little tidbits that have really, really made a difference for me. First, I wanted to give you a little bit of background. So I'd like you to imagine it's about 3 a.m. and the internet at our bed and breakfast is crawling to a standstill. I could not get this file to upload, and my job was on the line. Out on the street, my Hyundai Accent was stuffed to the ceiling with everything I owned, anything I could not sell or give away. If I opened a window, I would lose my pants. I had volunteered to make a presentation for my CEO in the middle of moving in my car from Washington, D.C. to Pensacola. Only 2 days before, they had decided not to let me go after all when I told them I was moving to Pensacola. I had an amazing supervisor who really stuck his neck out for me. And they decided that 2 days prior, they would let me be the department's first and only remote employee as an experiment. I was trying so hard to prove that I could work virtually that I committed myself to an impossible deadline in the middle of a move. I stayed up all night watching a file slowly upload. It was a rude awakening, but it's one that I know that you have probably felt too. How much notice did you have that you would be working remotely? Like a week? A few days, maybe even less. You just woke up one day and you were told, hey, you work from home now. All of a sudden, you're expected to be fully productive, just as effective, with an entirely new set of rules and technology, and everyone else you work with is equally new. I've been there, but I actually had an advantage over all of you because I wanted to be a virtual employee. Work from home life was forced on the rest of you. So now what? How do we make the best of it? How do we stay productive? What are the rules? And what do you do if you're a job seeker in this world? And what do you do if maybe you like working from home and you want to keep doing that? So, those are all the things I wanted to talk about, just sharing my best tips and tricks. If none of these topics are anything you want to hear about, now you know. I promise I'm not going to share anything that I haven't actually put into practice myself if it hasn't made a positive, demonstrable difference in the way that I work over the last 6 years. So these are just the top level highlights of the things I wanted to share with you today. First one is about virtual meetings. There's two definitions to the word virtually. One means doing something digitally. The other means to barely do something, to almost but close but no cigar do something. So there's a difference between meeting virtually and virtually meeting. So if you're having a remote meeting, we want to make sure that we are doing the former, which is just meeting virtually. It's a regular meeting that just happens to be virtual. So just again, these are the last 6 years, things that I know have worked for me that have really made the difference. So the first is having your video on and trying to make having your video on be the norm. Try to make a habit, try to encourage it from others. I consider having video on during meetings the best practice and the norm, and then using audio only for myself as a backup plan. And I'm an introvert with a messy house. But why, you might be asking? Having your video on, I have found over time, it really does keep people engaged. They're more likely to pay attention to you. They're more likely to listen to what you're saying. Also, everyone will know that you are paying attention because they can see you. Um, if you do have your video on, I will say make sure you're not also checking email because people can see the darting eyes. They can see you. I have also found that when I have my video on, there are fewer interruptions. People aren't talking on top of each other because we're picking up on nonverbal signals that someone's about to speak, um, that someone has an idea, so you're picking up on those nonverbal signals as well. And it doesn't feel as virtual when you can see other people. It's people are more engaged, it's easier to pay attention. And also if your video is on, if you're the only one, it very much will appear as though you are commanding a virtual room. Um, Now, I know that there are probably some of you who aren't comfortable with having video on all the time, but I would say that for deep, detailed, or critical conversations, those are always better had face to face, partly because it's hard to hate a smiling face. So, video on can help reduce misunderstandings and tension. Even if the other person doesn't share their video, I would still encourage you to if you're brave enough, because if you do, maybe they will too. If you're on a call and only one person is sharing their video, that person immediately seems to have more authority, they have more presence. So just try to make having your video on the new norm for your team and just using audio as a backup plan. Again, some of you may not be comfortable with this. I swear I would not be telling you this if it really hasn't made a difference in my meetings as the only remote employee in a team of people who otherwise would all be in the office, except, you know, COVID. So everyone's at home now. The other thing is about getting everyone to participate without talking over each other, because that is a real challenge. I have found that calling on people individually, even virtually going around the table, gives everyone a chance to speak and be heard. There's less chance of people talking over each other because everyone knows they get their turn. It will feel a little awkward when you first do this because it's not something we do in person meetings, like, and Jane, you have something to say. And now Bob. So like I know it might feel uncomfortable, but this is the best way that I know how to make sure that everyone is paying attention because they know they're going to get called on. Um, they'll respect you for kind of taking the lead, and no one will really, or not no one will, but it certainly reduces the risk that people will talk on top of each other, interrupt each other, that we have those moments of, oh, no, no, you go first. No, what were you going to say? So calling on people by name is really best practice for when you're in virtual meetings. The other thing is, if you really don't want to have your video on, this is a great way to get around that, is to be the person who takes the notes and share your screen. This is also the best way I know of keeping everyone on the same page. It's what I consider an advantage over in person meetings, where everyone can leave the meeting if it's in person and they take something totally different away. Everybody heard the same things being said, but then when people leave, it's almost like we were at different meetings. So, as a project manager myself, virtual meetings are my preference anytime I need to capture feedback, document processes and procedures, because everyone can see the notes that I'm typing and they can correct me in real time. They can see the action items as we're going down. And taking the notes, sharing my screen as I'm the taking notes has really made a difference as well in accountability. If I put an action item next to somebody's name, everybody else in the room sees that. And so we all have a shared understanding of what happened in the meeting and what our next steps are. So I found it's really good for keeping people on task and for making sure that you accomplish the goals of the meeting and that everyone knows next steps. The other tip I have for virtual meetings is sometimes things get heated. There's a misunderstanding. Two people simply cannot agree on a decision. It happens. Someone is talking too long. So I want to encourage you to have in your back pocket your exit phrase. So instead of taking time away from a meeting to hash it out, which is awkward for everybody, use an exit phrase. Common ones are, hey, let's continue this discussion elsewhere. Or so and so and what's her face. Why don't we continue this discussion offline? I think we'll need more time than we have left in the meeting to come to a resolution. And then the rest of your team can move on. Um, it's a way to kind of shut down some of those interruptions, people talking too long, or awkward tension. So have an exit phrase. Offering to take a meeting offline or to continue the discussion elsewhere, those are my exit phrases to kind of help bring things to a close. And the next thing is when I have a bunch of virtual meetings, and again, I work remote full time and have for years. So I have had the flexibility to do this. You may not, but if you do, try to chunk your meetings into chunks because it can help with time management. If all your meetings happen in one block of time, then the rest of your time is for focus work. If you have a meeting and then 30 minutes and then a meeting and then maybe 45 minutes and then another hour long meeting and then maybe an hour, it's so hard to get focused work done because you don't have long stretches of uninterrupted time. So as much as you're able, try to chunk your meetings all together. For you, that will look different than what it looks like for me. I try to chunk all of my meetings in the morning. That's easier for me because of the time zones of all my colleagues. For you, maybe that means you try to chunk all your meetings on Mondays and Wednesdays, which leaves you Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday for work. Or maybe you simply block off all of Friday and that's your concentrated work day. And then you just have meetings sprinkled throughout the week. The idea of chunking your meetings, grouping them together is really so that you have longer periods of uninterrupted time. Whatever it looks like is up to you. I get that you may have very little control over meeting schedule, but if you do have a say so, try out this tactic of stacking them as a way to get more uninterrupted time in your day for really deep focus work. So those are just my best tips for virtual meetings. I wanted to talk about LARPing, which is maybe not something that you have heard before. We're not going to pretend that everybody is still on board with remote working. There are plenty of people who believe that real work, a full 8 hours a day, can only get done in an office where you can be monitored and supervised and seen. There are people who think that virtual employees spend their entire day in pajamas slacking off. The phrase working hard or hardly working, comes to mind. So, with that mindset, it can be very tempting to feel that you have to work even harder to prove yourself, to over communicate to the point of not being able to actually get work done because you are so busy leaving evidence that you're getting work done. In the world of remote employees, this is known as LARPing at your job. LARPing stands for live action role playing. Essentially, it means play acting at working while doing a bunch of unnecessary, low risk, busy work. It's a trap. It's something I've thought a lot about as a remote employee. How do I show I'm in the office when I'm far away, when I'm 2 time zones behind the vast majority of my team? By evidencing that I'm doing work instead of doing work. I don't think it's just a virtual thing. People do this in person too. You can LARP your jobs in person by holding lots of meetings, staying late and getting early just as a show of presenteeism, heavily documenting unnecessarily meeting notes, sending lots of unnecessary follow up emails, sending very interesting articles as an all staff CC, reply all apocalypse. So there's ways of LARPing in person too, but it's essentially it's the play acting at your job instead of doing your job. And the reason why we fall into this trap, I believe, as knowledge workers is because we do feel that we have to prove ourselves so much more. I can spend 8 hours a day and make 2 widgets, or I can spend 2 hours and make 8 widgets. When it's knowledge work, it's different. It's not an exact hour per output. And I sometimes feel, especially for our generation, we feel so much pressure to prove, no, really, we are working. But in that effort to prove how hard we're working, we don't do the actual working. So that's what LARPing means. And I want to encourage you to not do that and let the quality of your work really speak for itself. There is a good kind of LARPing. It is still okay and encouraged to check in. You can still have one on one meetings with your colleagues. If something would take 5 or more emails to discuss or resolve, it's best to virtually or literally pick up the phone and call somebody. That kind of regular communication is a good thing, and it's necessary for your continued success. Having regular one-on-ones with your direct reports, with your supervisor, that's good LARPing. Working remotely also means we miss out on social aspects of working in the office. So another kind of, hey, I'm here, look at me work, a good LARPing that you could do is we have a channel that I called Things We Love and Pay For, where people post pics of dogs and kids and plants, anything that they love and they spend money on. So it really makes my day when coworkers post pictures there. You can create a similar channel called Random, and it's just a way to check in with your team, say a quick good morning, share a silly meme. It's the best way that I know how to kind of replicate that water cooler chat that doesn't happen remotely. Another kind of good LARPing thing that you can try to do is arrive early at conference calls just to shoot the breeze. It's not performative, it has a real purpose. You can connect with others, and then you also look good for being super prompt. So those are good LARPing. So if you remember that 3 a.m. never ending file upload that I was talking about, the reason I share that story is because that was an example of having bad boundaries and committing myself to a huge project on an impossible deadline. Um, and doing a little of extra LARPing as well. So don't be like old me when I first started working remotely. Keep regular office hours and make sure you're clearly communicating them to your team. It will help so much to keep your sanity when you have a consistent work from home routine. It replicates the experience of going to office. So, as much as possible, try to keep regular office hours. And then when you're off, log off, turn off your devices, make sure you're setting personal boundaries for yourself around the technology you use in your free time. Don't take your phone to bed if you can help it. It can keep you awake, even with the blue light filter. I find that the notifications are super distracting. It's best for me to plug it in face down and then look away. And then I want to really encourage you to take breaks. This is something that you should do, honestly, whether you're remote or whether you're still in the office. Science says so. There's been numerous studies that prove that having short breaks actually increase your productivity instead of hinder it. You were not meant to stare at a screen for 8 hours straight. So set a timer, use an app. If you have a watch that bings at you and tells you to stand up, do that, stretch your legs every once in a while. Or you can even do something that I like to do is I create meetings for myself that are 15 minutes that people can't schedule on top of. And it just says meeting with Anne. And then my colleagues think that I'm in a meeting, but it's really just my time to do a little chair yoga, walk around my house, get a sip of water, just something to get up out of your seat. And again, it really does increase your productivity, not just trying to go ham on a task for 8 hours straight. So do not be afraid to take breaks from your work. So now I want to just share a couple of tips that I had about your setup. I have very strong opinions about setting up your space based on years of working remotely full time. So these are all things that I do every day at work and in my home. The first is designating a space to be your work zone, being deliberate about your background, getting a laptop riser, a stand, or an adjustable desk, investing in what you need to feel comfortable and productive, and consider having an emergency blazer. So, what I mean about designating a workspace is separating your work and your living spaces. This is for your own sanity. When you can work from anywhere, that means everywhere becomes your work. Go ahead and designate a space to be the work zone. This will also help psychologically. You do work in the workspace and living in the living space. It helps me to focus so much more because my brain is used to, oh, this is my work chair. I do work when I sit here. And then when I leave my office, I am done working and my brain turns off. It helps me with compartmentalizing. A central location, a work zone or a work chair. It also means that all your work related material is at the ready. It keeps things from getting lost all around the house, which can save you valuable time and sanity. It's also required by many employers If you apply, if you like working from home, you like this new way of working, and you're looking for a 100% remote full-time job, which I highly recommend. I think they're fantastic. It's required by many employers that you have a designated workspace. They want to know that you have a designated space that is set up for your success. So, separating your work and your living spaces for your own sanity is great. I want you to go ahead and designate a space to be your work zone. And then once you do that, let's talk about what's behind you. This will be especially important if you are interviewing for full time remote jobs. I'd really like to encourage you all to create a Zoom call with yourself and just see what your background looks like. Take your computer, walk around your house, find a place, and spend some effort on a background that you can stand to look at for hours a day. Try and infuse it with your personality if you can. You may think that this is silly because you will never be looking at it, but you do. Every time you are on a video call, you will see your face and you will see your reflection. And it's what your colleagues have to stare at every time they are looking at you on a call. So I would really encourage you to spend some time on your background. There's there's some simple ways to do it. You could just find a blank wall. There's nothing wrong with that. Or just hang a simple curtain behind you. Sometimes plain and simple is the best way to go. I would say try to stay away from having a window directly at your back where the light is shining behind you. Any photographer can tell you that being backlit is no good. People can't see your face, it's unattractive. So if you do find a workspace and you just can't help it, there's going to be a light source directly behind you. I would recommend getting lovely light blocking curtains if you can. That's actually what my husband does. He has to sit across from me. There's a window to his back. So the Target Opal House line is where it's at if you're looking for light blocking curtains. You can even use curtains, honestly, if you're not by a window and you just want an easy backdrop and you don't want to have to create something behind you. A plain wall is better than a busy, buggy virtual backdrop, which honestly, I'll say it right now, it can't stand virtual backgrounds. I think they're tacky. You can do it for like 2 seconds as an icebreaker or for a laugh, and then please don't. I have strong feelings about this. I really feel it's unprofessional to see people's hands and clothing disappear as the background changes around you. And it can be honestly kind of more distracting. You want the attention on you, not on your background. Even if your virtual background is plain white or a solid color, people are going to be wondering as it sort of jumps around you as you move around, like, what in the world is behind you that you have to use a virtual background to cover it up? So it can really kind of be more distracting. You don't want people paying attention to what's happening around you or whether or not your hands are disappearing. You want them to be paying attention to you and what you're saying. Um, so really try and put some effort into your background. Think of your space, your workspace, as a video production studio because honestly, now it kind of is. And then I really wanted you to consider investing in a riser, a laptop stand, an adjustable desk. They don't have to be expensive. I think mine was like $20 on Amazon. And it serves two purposes. Well, it serves three purposes. It may serve more if I think of more as I'm talking. It's more ergonomic. So you can avoid getting a hunchback from hunching over your laptop down here. You can, depending on how high it goes, you could potentially convert your desk into a standing desk at any time, which is great. But the most important thing about having a riser or a computer stand is that your camera will be at eye level. And that makes such a difference. If your camera is down here, it's going to give you kind of a double chin. Um, it's not as attractive, but also just as humans, like we want to see people's faces. We're going to try and simulate what it's like to be in a room with each other, to be sitting face to face with somebody. So having your camera at eye level, with just a few inches to spare above your head, because you still want to be in the frame, that is the ideal. So I really want to encourage you to get a real stand. If you just have a box, and you put your computer on top of that, that'll also work in a pinch. And then get what you need. this is this is an advantage, I think, to working from home that maybe you couldn't do this in a real office. If you need 2 screens to be effective, get 2 screens. I have 2 so that I can have a presentation on one screen and then I can have notes on another screen. If you need a wireless keyboard and a mouse, you can, if it's on a stand and your hands are up here, if you need a wireless keyboard and a mouse, get them. If you will be more productive with a balance ball chair, get one. If you need noise canceling headphones, get them. If you need a standing desk, whatever it takes for you to be your most productive, go ahead and invest in what you need. You're going to be in this space for 8 hours a day or more. It is critical that you can do work in your space. So I encourage you to make the investment, get whatever you need to make sure that your work gets done. That could be better lighting, a faster internet connection, an ergonomic chair. I really want to encourage you to resist the urge to just make do with what you've got because it may hurt you in the long run. We don't know how long we will be working from home for COVID. I work from home all the time, always anyway. So I'm telling you to please, you're going to be spending upwards of 8 hours a day in this space. Make sure that your workspace is working for you. Make sure that you are comfortable, that you have what you need to be productive. And this is a bit silly, but it really has saved my butt so many times. This is my emergency blazer. It can make almost anything I'm wearing seem a little bit more professional, and it has saved my butt on several occasions. I try to be prompt to meetings. It's a lot easier because, I don't have a commute, but every now and then a meeting will just sneak up on me or someone will just send me a Slack message and say, "Hey, I'm on the phone with the VP right now. Can I add you in?" And I look a hot mess. So this has been a lifesaver for me anytime I need to hop on an important call with very little notice. Somebody needs to talk to you right now, but you literally just woke up or you need to lead a meeting and it starts in 1 minute and 30 seconds. So no matter how organized you are, it will happen that at some point a meeting will catch you off guard. So my emergency blazer and to be perfectly honest, emergency lip balm and emergency mascara have really saved my butt. So have one of these just on the back of your chair whenever you need it and you know you're going to need to look business formal and professional at the drop of a hat. Also encourage you with the emergency blazer is um, it may help you also to have something that makes you really chill and comfortable for these super important meetings. And what I mean by that is it's already stressful to be working from home. It's already stressful to be in a meeting with your VP or someone from the C suite. It's already stressful to have to run a virtual meeting. And all of that stress can really add up and kind of tank a meeting. But if you have fuzzy bunny slippers that just kind of ground you and help you chill out and relax, if you are business professional from the waist up, but then you have gym shorts and you're barefoot, if that's what it takes for you to still feel calm and in control, then do it. You can have your secret items on the lower half. So that's not something you can get away with in the office, maybe walking around barefoot or with like fuzzy slippers. But if that's what you need to do at home to make sure you're in the right mindset, absolutely do that. So you may need an emergency blazer and emergency fuzzy slippers or, emergency sweatpants. Do what you got to do. Um, and then I wanted to talk about also virtual interviews. I've had a few rounds of virtual interviews for full time remote positions uh, recently, which y'all are all going to keep that to yourselves. You're not going to tell anybody. So it's fresh in my mind. So these are the things that really worked for me for virtual interviews. And this is all just in addition to the regular interview prep. Like obviously you're going to want to Google interview questions and make sure you have answers to the behavioral interview questions and everything that you would do to prepare for an interview, but these are just the extra steps you'll need to take if you are having a virtual interview. I have a curtain at my house that keeps toddlers out. For you, it may be a do not disturb sign on the door. You really don't want an interruption if you're on an important call or a job interview. I think we've all seen the video of the toddler interrupting an on air television interview. If you have dogs, cats, nosy roommates, tiny humans, just be sure to keep them out for the duration of your interview. Make sure you're protecting your space. That may mean that you need to go to somewhere other than your workspace, somewhere that does have a closed door, so that you can make sure that you will not be interrupted. And then I recommend, just as before, that you that you're purposeful about your background, especially when interviewing a job. It can be even more important. You may need to switch up where you sit specifically for job interviews if you're limited in terms of the background for your workspace. If it's possible, just sit in front of a blank background so that you remain the focal point. If that's not possible, find the least messy, most business-like location that you can. Make sure it's clean. Check your lighting. Actually have a lighting source if you can directly in front of you. It's the most flattering. So you can sit in front of a window or even get a selfie light. You can get these on Amazon that attaches to your computer. I have one over here to make sure that I am lit from the front, and it's a soft, warm white, to make sure that you've got a light source as well. And think about how you'll appear on camera and make adjustments to your setup as necessary. This is another area where I highly recommend some kind of a riser or a computer stand so that your camera is at eye level. On a virtual interview, I want to encourage there is a difference between me spending the entire interview like this, which is fine for casual conversations, and me answering questions like this. There's a real difference. Because you took my advice and you got that laptop riser that I talked about before, you can make fantastic fake virtual eye contact. Fake eye contact, because we're digital, you have to fake it by looking at your camera. Research shows that employers are more likely to remember what you said. Employers are more likely to remember what you said if you maintain eye contact. So be sure to keep your eyes focused on the camera, not at the screen or the image of your hiring manager as you converse. Do you have to make fake eye contact all the time? No, I don't want you to get whiplash during meetings. But when you're being interviewed, it can make a difference in how you're being perceived as professional and put together if you're making fake eye contact. I know there's some technology that's being talked about where you can look at your screen and it will make it look like you are making eye contact. But until the technology catches up, in order to make eye contact, we have to make do and just act like hosts in a television studio and just stare at the camera. I would also recommend pushing your computer back a little bit so that your hands don't show up like giant blurry monsters when you're trying to, if you talk with your hands, you don't want them here, so if I talk with my hands here, it just looks normal. If I talk with my hands here, it's blocking my face. So push your computer back a little bit, have a little space between the top of your head and the top of your screen. And again, treat your space like it's a newsroom studio because it kind of is. So you kind of have to act like a newscaster, and make that fake eye contact. And then definitely still dress the part. Your goal is to project professionalism. So what you wear should be the same as what you wear to an in-person job interview. Professional clothing shows that you're serious about the position, but there are other benefits too. Studies show that people feel more authoritative, trustworthy, and more competent when they are wearing business attire. So part of your dress code for job interviews I would also recommend is getting a headset and not headphones. So make sure you're dressing just like you would go to an in-person job interview, at least from the waist up. And then consider investing in a headset with a noise canceling microphone. Don't use a cheap plug-in headset unless you have to. Those mics kind of pick up everything. Every time you shift in your seat, you can hear the microphone brushing at your chest. They could pick up background noise, and they could just generally have low quality audio, and you really want to be heard clearly. You don't want anything distracting away from you and how you're answering the questions of the interviewer. It also signals that you've made an investment in your work from home space, that you are serious about your remote work. So I would consider having a headset to be just one more piece of your dress code for virtual job interviews. In closing, I know that this transition is hard. We are encouraged not to leave the house, which makes it very hard to enjoy a change of scenery when you're feeling stir crazy and cooped up. But if you take nothing else away from this, I just want you to make a deliberate effort to curate your work from home space. It pays dividends in your confidence and in your comfort, and therefore your presence. It affects how you show up on screen, how professional that you seem. I've shared just a few of the things that I've learned over the years. I hope they help you feel more confident, stay sane, and actually enjoy working from home and working remotely. It has been a pleasure. And if anyone has questions or remarks, I'd be happy to stay on a bit longer.
Well, thank you, Anne, for talking with us today and going over all this valuable information. Again, if anyone has any questions right now, feel free to speak up or put it in the chat. I'll read it from the chat if you cannot speak right now. But I'm also going to send a quick survey. So please click on this link and take it in the chat and let us know what you thought of today's webinar. But again, let's ask Anne some questions if you have any questions.
One question you may be asking that I'm just going to answer it because I'd like to brag on it. All of these Post-it notes around my face, this is Prezi, which you have probably used before. You download a special piece of software in Prezi, and the presentation that you make, they just put your face in the middle of it instead of whatever the background is. So that's how I'm able to have all of these things fly around my face, in case you were wondering. That's Prezi.
So cool.
So we had a question in the chat, and it was, what are your thoughts on the headset versus the small wireless earbuds?
I think it just depends on the quality of the wireless earbuds. What you can do is have a friend of yours, just have a Zoom call with them and try to go to a place that has like a little bit of white noise on and ask them point blank, like, do I sound good or do I sound not good? If they can hear background noise, if every time you shift your head, they're hearing your hair brush against it, then they're not the highest quality. I don't have anything against the wireless headset. I just found that this one, like, yes, I look like an air traffic controller, but it also, it kind of makes me look more like a boss. So that's why I like my headset. And has a noise canceling microphone, which can be really helpful for me because, again, my husband works directly across the desk from me. So if he's on a conference call at the same time I am, I really don't want people hearing him responding to his coworkers at the same time I'm talking, and it's a whole thing. So that's why I made the investment in noise canceling headphones with a noise canceling microphone.
So I actually have a question, since you mentioned your husband working across from you. How is that? Has he always worked from home as well, or did he just make this transition when COVID happened? How has that been to work across from your significant other every day?
It's been interesting. Yeah, no, he worked at an office like a real person, like a like a real boy. No, yeah, he worked from the office from Navy Federal. So it's just he's been working home from COVID. So I've seen him go through the same kind of growing pains that I did when I was first remote. Like, again, his back is to that window, and so he had to go through that. I can't see my screen because of the sun. I was like, should get a curtain. You should have listened to me. And not having his laptop on a riser and like hunching over, and people looking up his nose because that's where the camera was. So I've got to see him kind of go through those growing pains. But yeah, I mean, it's working out really well. It's been really, I think, good for our relationship too, because I sort of have a coworker. It's like when you're studying in college, if you go to a coffee shop and everyone else is studying, even though they're studying something different, because you're around people who are working, it makes you want to work too. You don't want them to catch you goofing off. You know what I mean? There's just so it's sort of like having an accountability buddy for productivity.
I like that. I like that. All right. Are there any more questions for Miss Ann?
I don't have a question, but I've been working remotely for about 2 years now, and I actually worked remotely from Guam when my husband and I were stationed there. And so I have some tips also that I'd like to just lay out there. The first is if you're working 14 hours ahead of Eastern Standard Time, a really great tool is something called World Time Buddy. And I'll put it in the chat. And that kind of helps you convert time zones. So like for me, when I was in Guam, 9 a.m. was 6 p.m. Eastern.
Oh my
And
goodness.
everybody else that I was working with is located on premises at a school. And so at least I knew sort of like when I started working, everybody was done working, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
And then another
that's a great
thing,
tool.
say again, sorry.
Oh, that's a great tool. Yeah.
Yeah. And then another thing too is your point about the background window is totally valid. And the way that I fixed it was you can't see, but I have 4 lamps around me right now. So it doesn't look like I'm backlit. I just have other lights, yeah, floating on top of me. So yeah, those are my 2 extra tips.
Well, thanks for sharing, Rachel.
Mhm.
That's really fascinating too. God, I would love to work from home from Guam.
It's kind of like your only choice in Guam, honestly, unless you know, are in the military, then people have actual work places to go to. But yeah.
All right. Are there any more questions before we wrap this up? If not,
Oh, I thought of something. Okay, so let's say you're working from home and you really like working from home and you want to stay working from home because you like working from home. And I'm going to say working from home just one more time. Um, there are a couple of websites that I would recommend where I have found jobs working remotely. One is called weworkremotely.com, and I can put
Yep.
them in the chat as well. The other one is I also have a membership at Flex Jobs,
Mm-hmm.
and we work remotely. And then there's another one called Remote OK. So if you're specifically looking for a job where you want to stay working from home, there's a lot of opportunities now, especially because there are places that have just decided, well, we're working remotely. We're just going to let go of our leases. We're just not going to have offices anymore. You know, like I know like Kaplan just decided that they were just going to close their offices and everybody works remotely now. So if you are looking for a job, I would recommend going to specifically a website like that. Indeed.com, you know, LinkedIn, they do have filters to find remote work, but I've had the most success getting like legit jobs using websites that were specifically for looking for remote work. A lot of them do tend to be more technical in the IT field, but there's all kinds of stuff out there from, you know, operations to project management. So it's not just for developers. You can find something out there that is remote. Because hopefully you love this like me and you want to stay remote.
I do. And I've checked on all those websites. I have like filters and alerts for the jobs that pop up on there too. So they're really great resources.
all right. Any more questions? Because I think we're about to be wrapping this up. And again, if you can, please take the survey that is in the chat. I will get it one more time.
Thank you, Ann and Bradley. This was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. And we did record this, so we will be sharing it. It'll probably be a day or so before we get it posted and whatnot. But again, thank you, Anne, for sharing your valuable knowledge of the working from home sector and what it's like and the tips and tricks on how to improve, because I don't enjoy working from home. I didn't know how to do it. And you have shared some very insightful tips. I even wrote down stuff on a paper right next to me to show my boss. So yeah, so thank you. Thank you for doing this for us.
Thank you for having me. This was an absolute pleasure.
All right. Well, I will see you all guys later, and everyone have a wonderful week. All right. Thank you.
Bye.